I flew 11 hours from Zurich, dragging my suitcase to my dream house, only to see a scarlet, sold sign staring back at me. My phone rang. It was my sister, Sloane. Her voice was a soft chuckle. You found out I helped you sell it. I didn't send her to prison, her own crimes did that. But that night, more than just a house was sold. If trust was a key, she used it to unlock every door, including the one that destroyed my family. My name is Evelyn Hart. After 3 weeks in Zurich negotiating a component deal for Northbridge Logic, the recycled air of the plane felt like a permanent part of me. All I wanted was the cedar-scented breeze of Redwood Bay and the feel of my own front door under my hand. At 36, I'd finally bought a modest but perfect house in Harborview Ridge, a place with a small yard for my 9-year-old daughter, Rosie, to grow lavender, a place that was entirely ours. The cab dropped me at the curb. The late afternoon sun was warm, but a chill went through me that had nothing to do with the weather. A sign was hammered into the lawn I had just paid to have resodded. A garish, blood-red sign with a single, brutal word, sold. For a moment, my jet-lagged brain refused to process it. A mistake. Some other property. I walked up the stone path, my suitcase wheels rattling a frantic rhythm against the pavers. I slid my new key into the lock. It stopped. A hard metal rejection. It wouldn't turn. It wouldn't even go all the way in. The lock had been changed. My first thought was of Rosie. My sister Sloane was supposed to be watching her. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers thick and clumsy. I dialed Sloane's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice light and breezy. Hey, Evie. How is Switzerland? Sloane, where's Rosie? Is she okay? She's fine. Right here watching a movie. We are having pizza. A pause. Did you go by the house? The casualness of the question was a slap. What's going on? There's a sold sign on the lawn and my key doesn't work. Another pause. This one filled with something I couldn't name. Not guilt. Oh, that you found out, she said, followed by a soft, infuriating chuckle. I helped you sell it. Got a cash offer. Moved really fast. I was going to tell you tonight. The world tilted. The trees of Harborview Ridge seemed to bend inward. You what? The words were a croak. I sold it for you, she repeated, as if explaining something simple to a child. Don't worry, I handled everything. The numbers came out of me in a strained whisper. Sloane, what was the price? She told me the figure, and it was a joke, a fire sale price barely a third of what I paid just 2 months ago. It was financial ruin. I learned it was pushed through a tiny brokerage I'd never heard of. The verification process apparently consisting of a single phone call. Why? I managed to ask, my voice hollow. Why would you do that? I was worried about you, Evie, she said, her tone dripping with manufactured concern. You're a single mom stretched so thin with that big mortgage. It's too much pressure. So, I took care of it. I proactively arranged your life to be more manageable. In fact, I've already put a security deposit down on a lovely 2-bedroom apartment for you and Rosie downtown. Much more practical. She had not sold my house. She had stolen it. She had erased my future and handed me one of her own design, all without my consent. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it left no room for screaming. It was a cold, quiet void. That night, after I picked up a confused Rosie from Sloane's house with a clipped, sterile exchange, I did not cry. I did not break things. Once Rosie was asleep, surrounded by boxes that now had no destination, I opened my laptop. The rage was a white-hot engine inside my chest, but I channeled it into precision. I created a new folder on my desktop, Project Homecoming. I compiled a timeline starting with the date I left for Zurich and the date I signed a temporary medical power of attorney for Rosie over to Sloane, a standard precaution. I screen captured every text message from my sister over the past 3 weeks. Her cheerful updates about Rosie now looked sinister. I downloaded my flight itineraries, my hotel receipts from Zurich, my credit card statements showing transactions in Switzerland. I photographed the offending sold sign and the useless key. Each file saved was a nail I was hammering into a coffin. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. The product manager in me was taking over, treating this catastrophe as a flawed product launch that needed a post-mortem. There would be no emotional outbursts, no frantic family calls. That was the terrain where Sloane thrived, where she could paint me as unstable and herself as the long-suffering savior. I would not play her game. This would be fought on my terms, with evidence and law. I looked at the growing list of files, a silent promise formed in the sterile glow of the screen. Calm as a weapon. At dawn, lawyer first. Alden Price's office was a testament to organized thought. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were filled with leather-bound legal volumes, not for show, but with the cracked spines of frequent use. There was no clutter. He was a man in his late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of unflappable calm. He listened to my story without interruption, his hands steepled on a wide mahogany desk. I presented my folder, Project Homecoming, and he reviewed my timeline and documents with a series of quiet, affirming nods. He finally settled on the document I dreaded the most, the temporary power of attorney for a minor. He read the single page slowly, then read it again. When he looked up, his expression was grimly resolute. Ms. Hart, he began, his voice precise and devoid of pity, which I was grateful for. This document is exceptionally clear. It grants your sister the authority to make medical decisions for your daughter, Rosie, in the event of a health emergency where you are unreachable. That is its sole and entire scope. He tapped a specific clause with his pen. It explicitly prohibits any and all financial transactions, asset management, or real estate dealings on your behalf. There is no ambiguity here. This isn't a gray area. This is a flagrant violation. He leaned back, the leather of his chair groaning softly. What your sister has done isn't just a familial overstep. It's a constellation of potential felonies, he began, listing them, each word landing like a stone. Abuse of power of attorney, even a limited one, to create the illusion of authority, real estate fraud, embezzlement, given she directed the funds from the sale, conspiracy to defraud, since it's highly unlikely she acted alone. The low sale price suggests collusion with the buyer to undervalue the asset. The first step, he explained, was to follow the money. It was the one thing that never lied. Within hours, his paralegal, a ferociously efficient woman named Clara, had pulled the title report. The buyer was not a person, but a limited liability company, Harborview Holdings LLC. The name was a cheap, obvious attempt to sound established. A quick search of state business records revealed it had been incorporated just 5 weeks prior. The money trail was shockingly brazen. The funds from the sale, wired by the escrow company, landed in the LLC's new bank account, and were then transferred less than 24 hours after the closing into a joint savings account belonging to Sloane Whitaker and her husband, Trent Whitaker. There was no attempt to hide it, no sophisticated layering. It was pure, arrogant theft. Next, Alden focused on the facilitators. He placed a call to the escrow firm, Pioneer Escrow Services. The manager was defensive, claiming they had followed protocol. The protocol in question, it turned out, was a remote identity verification conducted by a mobile notary. The notary, they admitted, had verified the seller's identity, my identity, via a video call, a practice Alden immediately flagged as notoriously insecure and often against company policy for transactions of this size. Armed with this information, Alden filed an immediate ex parte motion to freeze Sloan and Trent's joint account along with the account belonging to Harborview Holdings. He attached my sworn affidavit, my flight records proving I was on another continent, and the initial title search. The judge granted the temporary restraining order within the day. The money was trapped. Simultaneously, Alden's office served a subpoena on Cobalt Key Realty, the obscure brokerage that had handled the sale. We demanded their complete file, the listing agreement, the appraisal reports, all internal and external communications related to the property. The documents came back 2 days later, and within them, we found the key to the entire fraud. Tucked behind the main purchase agreement was a one-page addendum, a special power of attorney for real property transaction. It granted the signatory, Sister Sloan Whitaker, the specific right to execute the sale of the Harborview Ridge house. And at the bottom, in a scrolled, unfamiliar hand, was my signature, or a clumsy imitation of it. She wouldn't dare, I whispered, staring at the scanned page on Alden's monitor. Oh, I think she would, he said coolly. Now, we ask the notary for their records. The mobile notary, under threat of legal action from Alden, forwarded the video file from the supposed verification call. It was exactly what Alden predicted. The video was grainy, shot at a low angle in a dimly lit room. The woman on screen, purportedly me, held up my driver's license, but her face was partially obscured by shadow and a lock of hair. Her voice was muffled. It could have been anyone. It was a sham designed not to verify, but to provide plausible deniability. This was no longer just a civil matter of reclaiming my property. This was a calculated criminal conspiracy. Alden advised we take everything we had, the money trail, the fraudulent addendum, the dubious video verification, to the county's economic crimes unit. He made the call, and our file was assigned to a deputy prosecutor named Dana Crowell, a woman he described as thorough and allergic to nonsense. While the legal storm gathered, I had to deal with the practical wreckage of my life. The first thing I did was call the downtown apartment complex where Sloan had proactively arranged my future. I cancelled the application and informed them the security deposit paid from an account I now knew contained stolen money was the product of a fraudulent transaction. Then I found a small, clean 2-bedroom rental in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing like my house, but it was safe. I packed our remaining boxes and moved Rosie in, focusing on making her room feel as normal as possible. We hung her drawings on the walls and found a sunny spot for her single potted plant. It was about creating stability in the chaos, a firewall between my daughter and the poison seeping from my own family. That night, after Rosie was asleep, I opened the journal I kept. It wasn't for legal notes or case strategy, but for the things I couldn't say out loud. Under the date, I wrote a simple, hard line, a promise to myself: no one touches my daughter. No one gets to redefine my life. The silence from my family was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I knew I had to be the one to break it. Taking a deep breath, I dialed my parents. My mother answered, her voice laced with a familiar, anxious cheerfulness. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, sticking to the facts: the changed lock, the sold sign, the drained equity. I expected shock, maybe anger on my behalf. What I got was a weary sigh. It was my father who came on the line next. "Evelyn, you've always been so independent," he said, his tone one of gentle chiding. "You're successful, but you can be cold. You push people away. She was just trying to help, to bring you back into the fold. By selling my house without my permission for a fraction of its value." I asked, my voice dangerously level. "She was worried," my mother cut in, her voice rising. "A single mother with that kind of mortgage. She was looking out for you, making things simpler. You should be thanking her for taking charge." I ended the call, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. They hadn't heard me. They had heard their own preferred story, Sloane the caring, if clumsy, fixer, and Evelyn the ungrateful, distant workaholic. The battle lines were drawn not where a crime had been committed, but where their comfort lay. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a picture message from Sloane, sent only to me. It showed 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives propped against a champagne flute. The caption read, "A little reward for Trent. He's been working so hard and deserves it." The arrogance was breathtaking. She was flaunting the money she had stolen from me. From Rosie. My first instinct was to fire back a text that would blister the screen, but I stopped. Calm is a weapon. Instead of replying, I saved the image to my laptop and forwarded it to Alden. His office replied within an hour. Using an EXIF data viewer, they extracted the metadata from the digital photo. It contained the timestamp of the purchase and, more importantly, the transaction ID from the airline. It was a direct digital link to the now frozen account that held my money. She wasn't just taunting me, she was handing me evidence. My parents called again, their tone more insistent. "We heard you've hired a lawyer. Evelyn, don't do this. Don't make a big deal out of a family matter. You'll tear us all apart." A family matter ended the moment a forged signature was put on a legal document, I said, the words feeling like ice in my mouth. The law doesn't stay outside just because the people who committed the crime are family. The strain was beginning to wear on me, but I refused to let Rosie see it. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed in our small rental, she looked up at me with wide, serious eyes. "Mommy," she asked, her voice small. "When are we going home?" "To the house with the garden for the lavender." I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, my heart aching. "We are going to have a new home soon, sweetie," I answered, keeping my voice steady and bright. "And I promise you, Mom will plant a lavender garden again somewhere else. It will be even more beautiful." She accepted it with the simple faith of a child. And in that moment, she gave me all the strength I needed. The attacks kept coming, shifting to the public square of our family group chat. Sloane posted a long, saccharine message about how her only motivation was pure love for her overwhelmed sister, and how sad it was that a myopic focus on money was blinding me to her good intentions. Reading the words, a memory sparked. A voicemail. I scrolled back through my phone's archives, my thumb flying across the screen. There it was. A message from Sloane, left 2 days after I'd arrived in Zurich. "Hey, Evie. Hope the trip is great. Quick weird question. Can you send me a scan of the house deed? The insurance company needs a copy for some new policy thing. No rush." The timing was damning. It was premeditation, plain and simple. I downloaded the audio file and sent it to Alden. My mother tried a different tactic, calling me in tears. "Sloane is fragile, Evelyn. She always has been. You're the strong one. Don't do this to her. Don't break her. She wasn't fragile when she signed my name to a sales contract, Mom," I replied, the softness gone from my voice. While Sloane played the victim, Trent played the role of the self-satisfied winner. His social media was suddenly a curated display of new wealth. A gleaming new watch on his wrist in one photo, a designer handbag he'd surprised Sloane with in another. He wasn't just spending my money, he was creating a public record of it. Alden had already subpoenaed their bank and credit card statements. The timeline was irrefutable, a massive cash infusion from the house sale, followed by a spree of luxury purchases. Through it all, I remained publicly silent. I didn't reply to Sloane's provocations. I didn't engage in the family chat. I let my parents' calls go to voicemail. Every piece of communication was a potential exhibit. Every interaction a risk. My only conversations were with Alden Price and Dana Crowell, the prosecutor. I was building a case, not winning an argument. Sloane and her enablers could have the chaos of the emotional battlefield. I would command the cold, clear territory of fact. The final blow came on a Tuesday night. I was reviewing documents on my laptop when a single text message appeared. It was from my father. There was no greeting, no preamble, just one sentence: "If you put your sister in jail, don't call me your father." I read it once, then twice. It was an ultimatum designed to shatter me, to force me to choose between justice and family. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, the white light illuminating the sudden, stark emptiness where my family used to be. I felt a tremor of grief, but it was quickly replaced by a chilling clarity. They had already made their choice. Now I was making mine. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the message. I simply took a screenshot. The click of the capture echoing in the quiet apartment. I saved the image to my evidence folder, naming it Emotional Pressure Exhibit A. It was another piece of the truth, and I would use it. The case built by Deputy Prosecutor Dana Crowell and Alden Price was not a single explosive revelation, but a series of quiet digital detonations. Each piece of evidence was a pin pulled from the grenade of Sloane's story, systematically dismantling her narrative of a well-intentioned, if misguided, act of sisterly love. It began with a simple request from Alden to the new owners of my house: a copy of the security footage from the front door camera for the 2 weeks prior to the sale. They complied, likely eager to distance themselves from the burgeoning legal mess. The file arrived in my inbox, and I watched it on my laptop in the sterile quiet of my rental. I fast-forwarded through days of mail carriers and passing cars until I landed on the date the notary claimed to have delivered the closing documents for signature. There on the screen was a woman with my build and hair color, her back mostly to the camera, stepping onto my porch. She was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, despite the overcast day. She took the large manila envelope from the courier, signed a digital scanner with a quick, jerky motion, and retreated inside my home. My home where Sloane had been staying. The timestamp on the video was 14:32 Pacific Standard Time. I pulled up my own files at that exact moment, 23:32 Zurich time. My credit card statement showed I was paying for a dinner at a restaurant near my hotel, and the check-in data from the airline confirmed my flight was not for another 12 hours. My phone's GPS data, which Alden had requested I download, placed me squarely within a 1-kilometer radius of Paarter plots in Zurich. I was physically, digitally, and verifiably on the other side of the planet. This alibi was the steel frame, but Dana Crowell wanted the flesh and blood of the crime itself. She focused on the notary's blurry video call. While the visual was useless for a positive identification, the audio was not. Alden hired a forensic audio expert to clean and enhance the sound file. He filtered out the muffled voice and the static, isolating the ambient noise in the background. And there it was, faint but clear. At the 7-second mark, a distinct melodic chime rang out, a Westminster quarter chime. It wasn't a common sound from a digital device. It had the rich, metallic resonance of a physical clock. The expert noted the brand of chime was distinctive, likely from a high-end modern grandfather or mantel clock. This was where the case turned from legal procedure to modern archaeology. Alden's paralegal, Clara, spent a day doing what she called a social media deep dive into Sloane and Trent. She scrolled through years of photos, posts, and videos. She found it on TikTok 6 months prior. Sloane had posted a short video panning around her newly redecorated living room. "Finally got our dream clock," the caption read, with a heart emoji. And there, against the wall, was a tall, elegant clock. As the video ended, the camera lingered on it, and the clock began to chime. It was the exact same melodic sequence, the same unique timbre. They had conducted the fraudulent video call from Sloane's own living room under the literal ticking and chiming of her own clock. The digital trail became a flood. The e-signature on the forged special power of attorney was the next domino. The platform used to sign the document recorded the IP address of the signatory's device. A subpoena to the Internet service provider confirmed the address was registered to Trent Whitaker at their home address. They hadn't even bothered to use a VPN or a public network. The metadata from the PDF scan of the signed document, the one Sloane had claimed the insurance company needed, told its own story. The file properties clearly listed the authoring software and the user profile of the machine it was created on, TWW desktop, Trent Whitaker. Even more damning was the file creation timestamp, 2:17 a.m. This wasn't a casual business hours favor. It was a secret, dead-of-night forgery. While Dana's office collected the digital proof, Alden's team tore apart the financial and professional conspiracy that enabled it. The invoice from Pioneer Escrow Services for the remote verification had a curious detail, a promotional code. FriendFast had been applied, giving them a small discount. It seemed insignificant until Alden, on a hunch, included it in the subpoena to Cobalt Key Realty. The internal emails they received were a gold mine. The code was an internal referral bonus given to agents to offer to friendly clients for a quick, no-fuss closing. It was not meant for the public. The agent who handled my home's sale had used it. Why would he do that? The answer came from another subpoena. This time for the agent's personal bank records. 2 days after the closing, he received a mobile payment of $5,000. The payment was from an account belonging not to Sloane or Trent, but to a man named Gerald Finch. A quick background check on Mr. Finch revealed 2 key facts. He was the sole registered agent of Harborview Holdings LLC, the shell company that had bought my house, and his social media profile picture showed him standing with his arm around Trent Whitaker. The caption read, "College roommates, 20 years and counting." The conspiracy was now a web connecting Sloane, Trent, the real estate agent, and the puppet buyer. The final piece was the criminally low appraisal. The report submitted by Cobalt Key Realty used 3 comparable sales to justify the price. Dana's investigator mapped their locations. All 3 were from neighborhoods over 30 miles away, in areas with lower property values and higher crime rates. It was a deliberately constructed fiction, designed to pass the superficial scrutiny of the escrow company and provide cover for the theft. Alden and Dana laid all the files out on a conference table, the doorbell video, my flight data, the audio file of the chime side by side with the TikTok video, the IP address report, the PDF metadata, the invoice with the internal promo code, the text messages from the agent obtained via warrant showing him discussing a cash bonus with Trent, the incorporation papers for the LLC, the fraudulent appraisal map. It was overwhelming. It was irrefutable. This wasn't Sloane arranging my life. This was a meticulous, multi-pronged criminal conspiracy to defraud me, executed with a breathtaking sense of impunity. It was an ambush planned weeks in advance, using my trust as a weapon and my physical absence as an opportunity. Dana Crowell looked at the complete picture, her expression hardening. "They are moving the money," she said, her voice low and firm. "The transfers from the LLC to their personal account. The spending spree. They are trying to liquidate and hide the assets. The Maldives tickets aren't a vacation. They are an escape plan." She picked up her phone. "We can't wait for a grand jury indictment. The flight risk is too high." She dialed her chief investigator. "Get me a judge. I need emergency arrest warrants for Sloane and Trent Whitaker, and I want them executed by sunrise." Dawn broke not with light, but with the strobing pulse of red and blue. The colors washed over the quiet suburban street, painting flashing streaks across the windows of neighboring houses. Curtains twitched, doors opened a crack. The arrest warrants for Sloan and Trent Whitaker were executed with practiced quiet efficiency. There was no shouting, just a firm, repeated knock that echoed in the pre-dawn stillness. Sloan answered the door in a silk robe, a confused and annoyed expression on her face that curdled into disbelief, as she saw the uniformed officers and the dark sedan at the curb. By the time the first local news van, tipped off by a source in the prosecutor's office, screeched to a halt, she was already performing. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, her voice pitched to carry a tremor of theatrical panic in her tone. "It's a family matter. My sister is just upset." As they clipped the cold steel of handcuffs around her wrists, she twisted her body toward the news camera, her face a mask of wounded betrayal. Evie, please tell them I was only trying to help you." The cry was perfectly delivered. A desperate plea from a loving sister, meant to be the defining soundbite of the morning. Trent was silent, his face pale and slack with shock. He was led out a moment later, his eyes fixed on the ground. As an officer guided him toward the car, a cheerful electronic jingle erupted from his pocket. His phone was ringing. The officer escorting him instinctively glanced at the screen, which was lit up with a push notification from a travel app. "Maldives Sun Travel Wire Transfer Confirmation for your upcoming trip has been received." It was the final damning proof of their intended escape. The news cycle ignited. By mid-morning, Dana Crowell stood at a podium, flanked by the county seal. She was calm, professional, and brutal in her clarity. "This morning, Sloan and Trent Whitaker were arrested in connection with what we allege is a sophisticated scheme involving abuse of power of attorney, real estate fraud, and conspiracy," she stated, not looking down at her notes. This was not a family misunderstanding. This was a calculated crime that leveraged modern technology and exploited a position of profound trust for financial gain. The phrase tech-enhanced fraud was catnip for the media, and it was soon everywhere. I saw my parents for the first time on the lunchtime news. They were outside the precinct, caught in a scrum of reporters. They had not come for me. They had come for Sloan. My mother was weeping into her hands, but it was my father's face that stunned me. It was purple with a rage I had never seen directed at anyone but strangers. He found a camera, his eyes boring into the lens as if he could see me through it. "Traitor," he roared, his voice cracking with emotion. "You did this. You destroyed your own family." "Traitor," he spat the word. A final, venomous verdict. By the evening news, the story had a visual centerpiece. The photo Sloan had sent me of the first-class tickets to the Maldives was plastered across the screen, set next to her disheveled mugshot. A news anchor with a serious expression narrated. "While the source of the funds for this lavish vacation is now central to the investigation, it highlights the lifestyle the couple was enjoying just days before their arrest. They had bought their 15 minutes of fame with my life savings." Alden had been explicit in his instructions. "You are the victim of a crime, Evelyn. You are not a commentator. Say nothing." When a persistent local reporter caught me coming out of a grocery store, shoving a microphone in my face, I almost broke. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show them my father's text message, to tell them about the clock chime and the 2 a.m. Instead, I stopped, looked directly into the camera, and said one thing, my voice even and low: "The truth is loud enough on its own." Then I walked to my car, my hand steady on the wheel. The fallout spread beyond my family. The media, smelling a bigger story of corporate negligence, began digging into Pioneer Escrow Services. They uncovered a history of complaints, a pattern of lax verification protocols that had harmed other families. Cobalt Key Realty went into full damage control. The agent who had handled the sale was fired in a public statement. The company issued a groveling press release expressing their deep regret and shock, promising a full internal review and their complete cooperation with the district attorney's office. As for Harborview Holdings LLC, the shell company created to swallow my house, it simply vanished. A filing for dissolution was submitted online within 24 hours of the arrests. It was a futile gesture. The corporate entity was dead, but as Dana Crowell had assured me, the money it had briefly held was very much alive and frozen solid in the bank's possession. In the midst of the public chaos, a private missile arrived. It was a letter, hand-delivered to Alden's office from the county jail. The envelope was standard issue, but the handwriting inside was Sloane's elegant, looping cursive. It was short, filled with phrases like horrible mistake, and so much you don't understand. It ended with a plea, please, Evie, we have to talk. Just sister to sister. No lawyers. Let me explain everything. It was a classic Sloane maneuver, an attempt to pull me back into the fog of emotion and personal history, where she could manipulate me. I scanned it and sent it to Alden. His reply was swift and unequivocal, absolutely not. Do not engage. She is not your sister right now. She is the defendant in a criminal case. That night, I put Rosie to bed in our small, quiet rental. The television was off. The internet was off. The world of flashing lights, shouting reporters, and my father's rage was locked outside. I sat on the edge of her bed and read her a story about a princess who had to leave her castle and find a new, smaller, but stronger one. Rosie listened, her eyes heavy with sleep, her world safe and contained within the four walls of her room. She knew nothing of the storm raging outside, and I intended to keep it that way. As I watched her drift off to sleep, a strange sense of calm settled over me. No one had been truly hurt. My daughter was safe. I was whole. There was just a roof that needed to be rebuilt. And this time, I would build it myself on solid ground. The period that followed the arrests was not one of quiet victory, but of strategic, silent warfare. The pre-trial phase was a chessboard, and Alden Price and Dana Crowell were playing with coordinated precision. The official indictment handed down by the grand jury was a formal declaration of that war. It listed the charges in cold legal language that belied the deeply personal nature of the crime: felony real estate fraud, forgery, abuse of power of attorney, conspiracy to commit fraud, and a lesser charge of money laundering tied to their lavish spending spree. Each count was a legal brick in the wall being built around my sister and her husband. Their first move was predictable. Sloane's newly hired defense attorney, a slick operator with a reputation for turning criminal cases into family melodramas, reached out to Alden with a plea offer. It was a classic gambit. Sloane would plead guilty to the single charge of abuse of power of attorney. The other, more serious charges, particularly the fraud and conspiracy, would be dropped. She would likely serve a reduced sentence, perhaps even just probation. But there was a condition, a poison pill attached to the offer. I would have to withdraw my civil suit for punitive damages, settling only for the original fraudulent sale price of the house. They wanted me to pay for her leniency with my own financial future. Alden laid out the offer on his conference room table, as if it were a contaminated object. They are trying to cap their financial liability, he explained. They know the criminal case is strong, so they are using it as leverage to save themselves from financial ruin in the civil case. He looked at me, his expression neutral, leaving the decision entirely in my hands. I didn't need a moment to think. The answer was forged in the fire of the last few weeks. Tell them no, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I met Alden's gaze. Money can be remade. Trust cannot. This was never just about the money. Alden nodded slowly, a flicker of approval in his eyes. He responded to the offer with a move of his own. The next day, he filed our comprehensive civil lawsuit. It was an aggressive, unapologetic claim seeking not just the full fair market value of my stolen home, but also significant punitive damages for emotional distress, plus every cent I had and would spend on legal fees. It was a clear signal to the other side. There would be no discounts on justice. The pressure immediately fractured the already weak alliance between Sloane and Trent. Faced with a mountain of evidence and a victim who would not back down, Trent's survival instinct kicked in. Through his lawyer, he began to float a new narrative. He was a peripheral player, a husband duped by a manipulative and desperate wife. Sloane, he claimed, had orchestrated everything, the forgery, the sale, the LLC. He was merely an unwitting beneficiary. It was a cowardly, desperate play, and Dana Crowell crushed it instantly. In a discovery meeting, she presented Trent's attorney with a series of text messages obtained from his phone between him and his college friend, Gerald Finch. The messages were a step-by-step instruction manual for creating Harborview Holdings, LLC. One text from Trent was particularly damning: "Need this airtight, Jerry. Keep it clean and simple. Just a holding company for a real estate asset. Plan B is a go. Plan B." The name they had given to the theft of my life. Trent's attempt to paint himself as a victim died in that room. The lesser players in the conspiracy began to fold, eager to save themselves. The mobile notary, facing the loss of his license and potential criminal charges, signed a cooperation agreement in exchange for immunity. He provided a sworn statement detailing exactly how the remote verification process was subverted. He explained how Sloane had used a pre-recorded audio snippet of a woman saying, "I agree," and how the low-quality video was deliberately angled to obscure her face. He confessed it was a method he had used before for agents at Cobalt Key who wanted to expedite a closing. The real estate agent, already fired and facing his own legal jeopardy, was equally cooperative. He turned over his call logs, which showed multiple conversations with Sloane in the days leading up to the sale. His contemporaneous notes, scrawled in the margins, quoted her directly, "My sister is in Europe for the whole month. She's completely out of touch, so we need to handle this quickly and quietly. She won't be checking on things." It was a direct quote that established clear, premeditated intent. With each new piece of evidence, Dana built her case for the preliminary hearing. The audio of the chiming clock became what she called the technological anchor of the indictment, an irrefutable, unique piece of environmental data that placed the crime squarely in Sloane's home. She presented her summary to the grand jury in just 20 minutes, culminating in a simple, devastating flowchart. It showed my house on one side and a picture of the Maldives tickets on the other. In between, a series of arrows depicted the money moving from the sale to Pioneer Escrow, to Harborview Holdings, to Sloane and Trent's joint account, and finally to luxury retailers and travel agencies. The jurors, a panel of ordinary citizens, nodded along, their faces grim. They understood. It wasn't a complex financial crime. It was theft, pure and simple. As the hearing approached, the pressure from my parents intensified. My mother left long, weeping voicemails, begging me to show mercy and think of the family. They were attempts at emotional sabotage, designed to wear me down. I saved them all and forwarded them to Dana. She listened to them and immediately filed a motion for a protective order, arguing that the defendant's family was engaged in witness tampering and inflicting emotional distress on both me and my daughter, who was a protected party in the case. The judge agreed. The order was granted. A legal wall that severed my last toxic ties to my family. All communication had to go through our attorneys. There would be no more calls, no more texts, no more ambushes. The sense of relief was profound, a quiet space to breathe in the middle of the war. The final crack in my sister's facade came not from legal pressure, but from personal betrayal. A week after the judge granted the protective order, Trent's lawyer filed a notice of legal separation from Sloane. He was officially cutting her loose, hoping to distance himself from the sinking ship before trial. That afternoon, a local news channel ran a clip of Sloane leaving a procedural hearing. A reporter shouted a question about the separation. For the first time, the mask of the wronged victim fell away. Her face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not quiet, dignified tears, but the raw, ugly sobs of pure, selfish loss. She wasn't crying because she had betrayed her sister, or because she was facing prison. She was crying because her partner in crime had abandoned her. She was at last completely and utterly alone. With the trial date set, the nature of my preparation shifted. The gathering of evidence was largely complete. The chess pieces were on the board. Now the work became internal. Dana Crowell and Alden Price prepped me for my testimony, but their questions often unlocked doors in my memory I had kept sealed for years. They were trying to establish a pattern of behavior, to give a motive to the jury beyond simple greed. For me, it was like excavating my own life and realizing the foundations had been rotten for a long time. A flashback, sharp and unwelcome, came to me during a discussion about Sloane's intent. I was 16, standing in the high school auditorium, my name having just been called for the academic honor roll for the 4th consecutive year. As I walked back to my seat, certificate in hand, I saw Sloane in the row ahead. She was a year older and had never once made the list. She turned and gave me a wide, bright smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes held a flat, assessing look, the same look a person gives a problem they are trying to solve. For my entire life, she had been standing half a step behind me in the shadow of every award, every small victory. Her applause always just a little too loud. Her smile just a little too fixed. The jealousy wasn't a sudden storm. It was the climate of our childhood. The memory of that flat look in her eyes dissolved into another, more recent one. The day I closed on the house in Harborview Ridge, it was the proudest moment of my adult life. A tangible symbol that Rosie and I were going to be more than just okay. Sloane came over that evening bearing a housewarming gift. A small, fragrant lavender plant in a terracotta pot. For peace and tranquility in your new home, she'd said, hugging me. It felt perfect. A sister's blessing. But during discovery, Alden's team had subpoenaed her phone records. And in a text message to a friend later that same night, they found the postscript to her blessing. The friend had asked how my new house was. Sloane's reply, it's huge. Way too much for her to handle. She got the plant I brought her, though. Let's see how long she manages to keep it alive. She wasn't talking about the lavender. This resentment was nurtured, I realized, by my own parents. They loved me, I knew, but they were unnerved by me. My career in tech, my promotions, my decision to have Rosie on my own, it was a life path they didn't understand. Sloane's life was their ideal. She had married Trent right after college, settled in a nearby town, and lived a life they considered stable. My success wasn't a source of unambiguous pride for them. It was a source of anxiety. They called it unsafe, unpredictable. They saw Sloane's predictable life as the benchmark, and my ambition as a deviation, a risk that needed to be managed. Their perspective gave Sloane a sense of justification, a feeling of righteous authority over my life. I remembered a conversation we'd had a year ago, after I'd received a major promotion. She was ostensibly congratulating me, but her words had a strange, menacing edge. You just have everything, don't you, Evie, she'd said, swirling wine in her glass. A great career, a beautiful daughter. It's a lot. Sometimes I think someone needs to regulate it all for you, just to keep it from spinning out of control. At the time, I dismissed it as a bizarre, clumsy comment. Now I saw it for what it was, a mission statement, and I had handed her the tool to execute that mission. The memory of signing the medical power of attorney was the most painful of all. It was the night before I left for Zurich. Rosie had a slight fever, and I was an anxious mess. Sloane had come over, all calm competence. She put her hand on my shoulder, her voice a soothing murmur. Don't you worry about a thing, she had said, looking me straight in the eye as I signed the form. "I'll take care of her, as if she were my own." The words had been my comfort as I boarded the plane. Now they echoed in my mind, twisted into a grotesque new shape. Taking care of her, as if she were my own, had never been about Rose's welfare. It was the key to my life. A key she used to unlock the door, walk inside, and declare herself the new owner. It was her chance to regulate me, to seize control, and force me into a life that she deemed appropriate, one that was smaller, poorer, and safely within her orbit. One night, unable to sleep, I opened a blank document on my laptop and began to write a letter I would never send. "Sister," it began. "They are asking me to explain your motive. Greed, they say. But it was never just about the money, was it? You didn't want my money. You wanted my life. You wanted to prove that I couldn't handle it so that you could step in and be the hero of a disaster you created. 4 years, I thought you were my closest ally. If trusting you was wrong, then who am I supposed to trust?" I closed the laptop, the questions hanging in the dark. A few minutes later, my door creaked open. It was Rosie, holding a piece of paper. "I drew our new house, Mommy," she whispered, climbing into my lap. It was a child's drawing, all crooked lines and bright colors. There was a big, lopsided sun, a tree, and a little house with a huge, smiling front door. On the porch, she had drawn a stick figure cat sunbathing. "He needs a wide porch for his naps," she explained seriously. Looking at that simple, hopeful drawing, my own resolve hardened into something new. I wasn't fighting to get my past back. The house in Harborview Ridge was already a ghost, tainted by betrayal. I was fighting for the future represented in that drawing, for the right to build a new home, to have a wide porch, to choose my own life free from the toxic regulation of others. I was fighting for justice, not restitution. The media coverage continued, a low hum of background noise. A popular legal blog published a long-form piece on the case, calling it a torn map of trust. I didn't read it. I didn't read any of it. My focus had to be absolute, narrowed down to the single task of preparing my testimony. There was only one thing that truly frightened me. It wasn't facing Sloane's lawyer. It wasn't the thought of the jury scrutinizing my every word. My only real fear, a cold dread that settled deep in my bones, was the thought of walking into that courtroom and seeing my parents in the gallery. The thought of looking at my father's face contorted with that same rage I saw on the news, and my mother's weeping not for me, but for my betrayer, that was the confrontation that could undo me. But in the long, quiet hours of preparation, I found a method, a simple physical anchor. When the fear would rise, I learned to close my eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and hold it. And as I let it out, I would make a silent promise to myself, speak slowly. Do not rush. Do not argue. Just let the truth lead. It was all I had left. It would have to be enough. The courtroom was a sterile, wood-paneled box, smelling faintly of old paper and nervous sweat. I had dreaded this place, but sitting at the prosecution's table next to Alden, I felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos of the past months was about to be distilled into the rigid order of legal procedure. This was my territory now, facts, evidence, and logic. Dana Crowe rose for her opening statement, her presence filling the room. She stood before the jury, her hands resting lightly on the lectern. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "This is a case about a house, but it is not only about a house. It is about the theft of a dream, the forgery of a signature, and the laundering of stolen funds. But beneath all of that, this is a case about the murder of trust. A trust so fundamental, so absolute, the trust between sisters, that its violation is a wound from which there is often no recovery." The trial unfolded with the relentless pace Dana had promised. Her first major exhibit was the notary's blurry video call. She played it on a large screen for the jury. The grainy image of the woman in the baseball cap flickering in the dim room. A murmur went through the gallery. Then Dana asked the technician to freeze the video at the 7-second mark. "Zoom in," she said. On the top right corner, the image magnified, pixelated, but undeniable. There, in the shadows behind the imposter, was the distinct shape of a tall clock. The jury leaned forward as one. Dana's next witness was the forensic audio expert. He explained in dry, academic terms how he isolated the Westminster chime from the recording. He played the clean audio for the court, a clear, melodic peal. Then Dana played Sloane's TikTok video from 6 months prior. The camera panned across her living room, and the same elegant clock began to chime. The expert played his isolated audio again. Then the TikTok audio. They were a perfect match. The frequency, the resonance, the unique acoustic signature, they were identical. Sloane, sitting at the defendant's table, flinched as if struck. The real estate agent was next. He was a nervous wreck on the stand, constantly wiping his palms on his trousers. He admitted to using the internal, FriendFast promo code, and to pushing the sale through quickly. When Dana asked him about the $5,000 payment from Trent's friend, he stammered, I thought it was a thank you, coffee money for a job well done." The jury looked on, their faces a mixture of pity and disbelief. The centerpiece of the prosecution's case was a massive flowchart displayed on the screen for a full 10 minutes, while an IRS investigator walked the jury through it. It was the simple, brutal diagram of the money. A picture of my house on the left. Arrows flowed from it to Pioneer Escrow, then split. One arrow pointed to the agent's bank account. The main flow went to Harborview Holdings LLC, then immediately to Sloane and Trent's joint account. From there, the arrows exploded outwards, pointing to credit card payments for designer watches, handbags, and at the very end, a large wire transfer to Maldives Sun Travel. It was a visual confession. Then it was my turn. Alden handled my direct examination. He walked me through the events, my voice steady as I recounted the discovery, the phone call with Sloane, the process of uncovering the fraud. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I simply stated the facts. Sloane's defense attorney's cross-examination was an attempt to paint me as a neglectful, work-obsessed sister who had forced Sloane into the role of caregiver. I answered his questions with the same calm precision. Alden's final question was the only one that mattered. He stood before me and asked, his voice gentle, Ms. Hart, can you please tell the jury what that house in Harborview Ridge meant to you? I paused, looking not at him, but at the 12 strangers who held my future in their hands. It was the first time in my daughter's life, I said, my voice clear in the silent room, that I could honestly tell her she had a permanent home. I said nothing more. The silence that followed was more powerful than any emotional outburst could have been. Sloane's lawyer, in his own presentation, tried to reframe the entire affair as a clumsy but well-intentioned family arrangement. He argued that this was a domestic dispute that had spiraled out of control and had no place in a criminal court. Sloane Whitaker is not a master criminal, he boomed. She is a sister who loves her family, a sister who simply tried to help. For her rebuttal, Dana Crowell didn't call a witness. She simply displayed another piece of evidence on the screen. It was a text message sent from Sloane to her friend the night she had convinced me to sign the medical power of attorney. The jury read the chilling words in unison. Got the POA. She trusts me completely. This time, I'm going to lock the door on her life for good. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Trent's testimony was a disaster. He tried to maintain his story of being an ignorant spouse, but on cross-examination, Dana presented him with an email he had sent to Gerald Finch. The subject line was, Plan B, keeping the price low. The body of the email detailed a strategy to use outdated and distant comparable sales to justify a low appraisal. He had no answer. He sat in the witness box, a man completely dismantled by his own words. The most difficult moment of the trial came when the defense called my mother to the stand. She was tearful and distraught, casting me wounded, pleading looks. She spoke of Sloane's fragility, her deep love for her family. During a heated moment of cross-examination by Dana, my mother broke down completely. She turned to the judge, her voice a wail. She just wanted to keep her sister in sight. Evelyn is always flying off, always moving forward. My daughter just wanted to keep her close. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, held up a hand, silencing her. She said, her voice cutting through the emotion. This court does not try misguided methods of affection. It tries crimes. Please answer the prosecutor's question. On the final day, Dana stood for her closing argument. She walked slowly in front of the jury box, making eye contact with each member. For weeks, she said, you have heard testimony about signatures and bank accounts, about video calls and chiming clocks. But what did the defendants truly do? They did more than sell a house. They tried to sell the victim's right to choose, the right to choose where she lives, how she raises her daughter, how she defines her own success. They saw a life they envied, and they tried to foreclose on it. She paused, turning to look at Sloane and Trent. Her gaze like ice. They sold her house, and in doing so, they tried to sell her future. The jury had been sent home for the day. The closing arguments were done. All that remained was the waiting. That afternoon, Sloane's defense attorney requested a final meeting. It was a Hail Mary pass, a last-ditch effort to avoid the inevitable. Alden and I met him in a sterile conference room down the hall from the now empty courtroom. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was their final offer. A bargain struck from the edge of a cliff. Sloane would plead guilty to the single charge of abuse of power of attorney. In exchange, the prosecution would drop the more severe counts of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. And, the crucial part, my civil suit would be settled for a fraction of the house's market value, barely enough to cover my legal fees. It was an offer designed to let her walk away with a slap on the wrist and leave me to rebuild my life from the rubble. Alden looked at me, his face impassive. The attorney watched me, a hopeful, predatory glint in his eye. They were waiting. I looked at the black text on the white paper, the formal language that tried to mask the ugliness of the proposal. 10 seconds stretched into an eternity. In that silence, I saw the scarlet, sold sign on my lawn. I heard my father's voice calling me a traitor. I felt the phantom weight of my useless key in my hand. This was never about a plea. It was about a precedent. I lifted my gaze from the paper, and met the lawyer's eyes. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the room with the force of a gavel. The negotiation was over. That night, the psychological warfare began. An audio file arrived in Alden's inbox, forwarded immediately to me. It was a voice memo from Sloane. Her voice a ragged, desperate whisper, stripped of all its previous arrogance. Evie, please, she sobbed. Don't let them do this to me. I know you won't talk to me, but just listen. It was Trent. It was all Trent. He pushed me. He set up the LLC. He found the agent. He told me what to say on the video call. If you go to the prosecutor, if you tell them, you'll ask for leniency for me. I'll testify against him. I'll tell them everything. I'll give you Trent, Evie, just save me. It was the ultimate betrayal. Her final, venomous card to play, turning on her husband to save herself. It was an attempt to drag me back into the murky depths of sisterly secrets and whispered bargains. I called Dana Crowell. I didn't have to play the message for her. I just told her its contents. Her voice on the other end of the line was like steel. You do not bargain with darkness. Evelyn, she said firmly, you do not trade one guilty party for another. You have the truth on your side. Let the jury do its work. The verdict is the only light you need to focus on. I hung up, the last of my resolve hardening into diamond. After I got off the phone, I went to check on Rosie. She was supposed to be sleeping, but she was sitting up in bed, drawing on a piece of construction paper with a purple crayon. She folded it carefully and handed it to me. For your pocket tomorrow, Mommy, she said. For luck. I unfolded it. It was another one of her drawings of our new house. This time, in the little yard. She had painstakingly drawn a row of spiky purple flowers. Underneath, in wobbly letters, she had written, Our new house will have lavender. The next morning, as I walked into the courthouse, I could feel the crinkle of that paper in my jacket pocket. It was my anchor in the storm, a tangible reminder of what I was fighting for. The air in the courtroom was thick with a heavy, static tension. We were all just waiting for the lightning to strike. Before the judge entered, Trent's lawyer stood and made a frantic, last-minute motion, claiming new evidence had come to light. He launched into a rambling speech, trying to throw the real estate agent under the bus one last time, portraying Trent as the victim of a manipulative professional. It was a pathetic, transparent ploy. Dana stood looking bored. Your Honor, she said. The prosecution would like to remind the court of Exhibit 42B. On the large screen, a document appeared. It was the receipt for the $5,000 coffee money envelope. And in the bottom corner, magnified for the entire court to see, was a crystal-clear fingerprint lifted from the paper by a forensic technician. The print was a perfect match for Trent Whitaker. His lawyer sat down without another word. The judge entered, and the jury was brought in. But before they could be sent to deliberate, the foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a serious expression, raised her hand. Your Honor, she said, the jury respectfully requests to see two pieces of evidence one last time, the notary's video call, and the prosecution's flowchart of the money trail. A silent shock wave went through the room. The defense attorneys slumped slightly in their chairs. The jury wanted to see the clock, and they wanted to follow the money. They wanted to look at the heart of the crime. As the exhibits were displayed again, Sloane's lawyer made one final, desperate play. He held up a framed photo of Sloane and Trent, smiling on a family vacation years ago. A picture of manufactured happiness. This is what's at stake, he cried. A family. Counselor, she warned, her voice dangerously low. This is a court of law, not a living room wall. Put the photograph away. The air grew heavier, the silence more profound. I could feel my father's gaze on me from the gallery. I didn't turn to look, but I could feel the weight of his anger, his disappointment. He was looking at me as if I were a stranger, an alien who had taken the place of his daughter. My eyes drifted to the back of the room, where a friend I'd asked to watch Rosie was sitting. I couldn't see my daughter, but I knew she was safe. Just outside this toxic chamber. I gave my friend the slightest, almost imperceptible nod, a silent message, I'm okay. This is for her. The jury finished their review. The foreperson nodded at the judge. It was time. You will now retire to the jury room to begin your deliberations, the judge instructed. The 12 men and women filed out, their faces unreadable. The heavy wooden door to the jury room swung shut behind them with a soft but decisive click. The sound of a lock tumbling into place, and then there was only the waiting. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. It felt like a lifetime and no time at all. When the bailiff announced they had reached a verdict, a hush fell over the courtroom so profound that I could hear the frantic beat of my own heart. They filed back into the jury box, their faces grim, their eyes deliberately avoiding the defendant's table. I knew then. The foreperson, the woman who had asked to see the evidence again, stood and handed a slip of paper to the clerk. The judge read it, her face betraying no emotion. She handed it back to the clerk, who turned to face the room. On the charge of felony real estate fraud, the clerk began, her voice ringing out in the stillness. How do you find the defendant? Sloane Whitaker. Guilty, the foreperson said, her voice clear and strong. On the charge of forgery. Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. Guilty. One by one, the charges were read for both Sloane and Trent. One by one, the foreperson's voice hammered the nails into the coffins of their lies. Guilty. 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 Sloane crumpled, a low, guttural sob escaping her lips. Trent just stared forward, his face the color of ash, a man who had already become a ghost. My parents, in the gallery behind me, were frozen in a tableau of horror. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at Sloane and Trent. Her voice, when she spoke, was not angry but filled with a cold, intellectual disappointment. This court has heard weeks of testimony, she began. Her words addressed to the defendants, but intended for the record, and in that time, a clear and disturbing picture has emerged. The prosecution has argued that this was a crime born of greed, and while financial gain was certainly a factor, the evidence suggests a deeper, more corrosive motive. She paused, letting her words sink in. The motive, this court believes, was a toxic combination of envy and a desperate need for control. The methods employed were not clumsy, but a calculated and sophisticated campaign of forgery and deception, exploiting the very latest in remote technology to subvert a system designed to protect property owners. And the consequences, she said, her voice dropping slightly, the consequences were not merely financial. The true consequence of your actions was the utter destruction of the most fundamental foundation of any family, any society, trust. You were given the sacred duty of protecting a child. Instead, you used that trust as a key to commit a crime against her mother. Then she turned to Trent. You were a willing and active partner, a co-architect of this entire fraudulent enterprise. The sentences came down like an avalanche. For Sloane Whitaker, this court imposes a sentence of 10 years in state prison. For Trent Whitaker, 8 years. A wail erupted from my mother in the gallery. My father seemed to shrink in his seat, his face ashen. The judge was not finished. Furthermore, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Evelyn Hart, in the associated civil case. The defendants are ordered to pay full restitution based on the fair market value of the property at the time of the fraudulent sale. They will also cover all of Ms. Hart's legal fees, and are ordered to pay substantial damages for emotional and non-financial losses. She named a figure that made me gasp. An immediate order is issued to seize any and all assets tied to the Shell Corporation, Harborview Holdings, regardless of who currently holds them. She concluded by announcing that her findings would be forwarded to the state licensing boards. Pioneer Escrow Services and Cobalt Key Realty, she noted, would face significant fines and a mandatory overhaul of their identity verification protocols. As the bailiffs moved toward them, Sloane's eyes found mine across the courtroom. Her face was a ruin of tears and disbelief. Her lips trembled as she mouthed a single, desperate sentence, a final, pathetic attempt at justification. I just wanted you where I could see you. I looked back at her, not with hatred, not even with pity. I felt a vast, cold emptiness. My voice, when I spoke, was for her alone. A quiet, final closing of the book. You don't get to sell my right to live. That was the moment my parents finally broke. A raw, animal cry of grief came from my mother, as she watched the bailiffs place her daughter in handcuffs. My father buried his face in his hands, his whole body shaking with silent sobs. The judge's gavel struck the block of wood with a sharp, definitive crack. "Order," she commanded. The first blow. I didn't wait to see any more. I stood, took Alden's offered hand for a brief, grateful squeeze, and walked toward the back of the courtroom. My friend stood waiting with Rosie, who ran to me, her small arms wrapping tightly around my legs. I took her hand in mine, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold stone of the hallway we stepped into. The heavy courtroom door swung shut behind us, and through the thick wood, I heard the judge's gavel strike a second time, a muffled echo, closing a chapter of my life. The hallway was a chaos of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Reporters surged forward, a wall of microphones and lenses. I stopped, pulled Rosie close behind me, and looked into the nearest camera. I would give them one sentence, one final truth to print. "Justice isn't a victory," I said, my voice clear and steady over the din. "It's a boundary." Then I turned my back on them. I didn't look back at the courtroom door. I didn't look at the clamoring press. Holding my daughter's hand, I walked toward the glass doors at the end of the long corridor. For a fleeting moment, I saw our reflection in the polished surface, a woman and a child, silhouetted against the bright light of the outside world, whole and unbroken. We were still standing. I still had the right to choose. As we pushed through the doors into the clean, fresh air, I heard it one last time, a faint, final thud from deep within the building, the third strike of the gavel. The story was over.